And now let me tell you about a concept that has stirred a hornet's nest: Swiss neutrality. It's an old concept. Switzerland refuses to take sides in a conflict, but the war in Ukraine is testing it. In the early days of the war, Switzerland gave in to Western pressure. It sanctioned Russia. But now the West wants more. It wants Switzerland to send arms to Ukraine. Remember, Switzerland is a vital manufacturing hub for weapons, and the West wants to send these weapons to Ukraine. But will the Swiss agree? Our next report tells you where they stand on the latest demand.
Switzerland's foreign policy faces a dilemma. It's a 500-year-old principle, the principle of neutrality. It's self-imposed, and it has now stoked an angry debate in the country and outside. The Ukraine war is testing Swiss neutrality. Switzerland is a major hub of weapons manufacturing. The West wants it to send these weapons to Ukraine. But Bern has denied permission. Its law bars Swiss-made weapons to be sent into war zones. The Swiss president says, and I quote, "Swiss weapons must not be used in wars. It is precisely because we are neutral and do not allow the transfer of weapons to war zones that we can do a great deal for this continent. Pacifism has a bad reputation right now, but warfare is not part of the Swiss DNA." So Switzerland is firm in its denial, and European powers are not happy about this. Germany and France in particular. There's criticism from Swiss lawmakers too. They believe their country should stand with Ukraine. Earlier this month, Swiss parliament voted to allow the transfer of Swiss-made weapons to Ukraine. It was passed with a razor-thin majority of 98 votes. But the proposal has inserted a tricky condition. It says Switzerland will send weapons only if the UN Security Council declares the Russian invasion illegal. With Moscow's veto powers at the UNSC, that is unlikely to happen. Meanwhile, Swiss citizens are weighing in too. As per a poll, 55% of them support sending arms to Ukraine. Another anguished party are Swiss weapon manufacturers. They say they're losing out on bulk orders in the market, more specifically, orders from Europe. In 2022, Swiss-made arms worth $1 billion were exported around the world. This was up from 29% the year before. But shipments to Europe fell. From about two-thirds in 2021, it now only got about half of Swiss-made arms. Western officials say Switzerland is being ignorant and indifferent to the plight of Ukraine. Bern does not agree.
Switzerland is a neutral country. Neutrality does not mean indifference. The violation of international law is a violation that Switzerland condemns while being a neutral country. Killing people, massacring people, has nothing to do with neutrality.
So what is it, Switzerland's neutrality principle? It was adopted in the year 1515. The old Swiss Confederacy lost the Battle of Marignano to the French. Around 10,000 Swiss fighters lost their lives. Since the setback, the Swiss decided to stay neutral in all conflicts. That principle was formally codified in the Hague Convention of 1907. The agreement required neutral states to refrain from engaging in war, ensure its own defense, and not supply mercenary tools to belligerent states. The world witnessed 2 world wars after that. Yet, Switzerland proudly calls itself neutral. It got its fair share of criticism too. During the Second World War, it shut its doors to Jewish refugees. Swiss financial institutions are said to have been a financial safe haven for the Nazis. They parked their wealth safely in Swiss banks. Similar instances have been reported during the Iraq War, and the biggest of all was during the apartheid in South Africa. Switzerland, unlike much of the world then, continued its economic ties with the regime. But most recently in Ukraine, Switzerland was seen cleverly sidestepping its neutrality rule. 4 days into the war, the country buckled under Western pressure and sanctioned Russia.
Russia's attack against Ukraine is unacceptable with regards to international law, politically speaking and morally. The Federal Council has decided to fully adopt European Union sanctions, including asset freezing.
This was a first for Switzerland. Interestingly, it didn't impose any sanctions on Russia when Moscow annexed Crimea in 2014. 2022 was a shift. The West is pushing for more. Ukraine is running short on ammunition. Many of the weapons and ammunition the West supplies to Kyiv have their roots in Switzerland. Will Switzerland relent? This is a developing story.